Welcome to the Kind Leader Podcast, where empathy meets action in the world of leadership. Your host, Gino Degregori, engages with innovators and seasoned professionals from diverse sectors, all demonstrating the power of leading with kindness. And now, your host, Gino Degregori.
Welcome to the Kind Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Gino Degregori. Today, we have the honor of welcoming Andrew Abela to our podcast here today. Andrew is the founding dean of the Busch School of Business here at Catholic University, where they strive to help their students grow into flourishing human beings. He's also the author of Super Habits, the Universal Systems for a Successful Life. And I believe you are my first guest as a published author there, Andrew. So I'm super excited to have you on the podcast today and learn more about you as well as your book here to help our audience with some of the information that you've created there. So welcome. And if you don't mind, could you please share about with our audience a bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I serve as the dean of the Busch School of Business here in Washington, D.C., about 700 students, a relatively new school in an old university. And our focus is very much on kind of human flourishing. We want our students to do well and do good in business. We want them to go out there and be very financially successful, of course, but also to do that in ways that uplift the people around them. We're seeing that happening, and we was very excited about that. My background, I've been here 22 years as a professor, and prior to that, I worked in marketing at Procter & Gamble. I was a brand manager there, and then I spent 6 years with McKinsey & Company as a management consultant working all over the world. So,
awesome. Well, great. Congratulations on all your success in doing amazing things with the school there as a dean and making an impact. As I said, I like to say, you're impacting those folks to then go out and do amazing things. So thank you for that. So one of the first questions that I ask my guests here is, what does being a kind leader mean to you?
So being a kind leader, you'll see, I see many things through the lens of what I call the super habits, so virtue. And so kindness, I interpret as a type of love, right? So to be a kind leader is a loving leader. But I define love not in the sense of kind of an emotion, a feeling of love, but an attitude and an intention and a habit. And it's a habit of doing kind of what is good for others, right? So is kind of willing and doing what's good for others. So a loving leader is a leader who does what is good for his or her people, and leads them to do what is good for others.
That was beautiful. I really like that, and then I think there was two maybe other guests in the past. You're my 26th, by the way, guest here. So not everybody describes it or includes love in that, because I think you don't think about love in the workplace or in the, in that type of environment. I like how you defined it. It's not so much about the emotional, right? It's about the caring. It's about, really listening and building that trust to help and help your team around you rise together, at the end of the day, right? So
I think it's important, because if you think of love or kindness as a feeling, then your poor subordinates have to hope that you're feeling it that day. So whereas if it's a habit, it's much more entrenched.
Absolutely. So interesting. So the habits of, because you can't fake it. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to do this or execute, I'm going to become a kind leader now, right? So, and then all of a sudden, you can't just do it without building those habits. And, I'm curious on what those are, because there are some foundational traits, right, that you have as an individual that you don't just naturally, like if I want to do something, you have to create those habits. So speaking of habits, we'd love to understand how you got the idea of creating this book, first of all, right? And what inspired you to say, I'm going to put a book on habits? And then we'd love to know a little bit more about this book as well, please.
Yes. So it was reading in a number of different areas that seemed to converge for me. So there were a couple of white papers, one from the McKinsey Quarterly, another one from Deloitte, and both of them said similar things, which is that for employees to be successful, it's not enough for them to have skills, but they need to have these underlying capabilities like self-discipline and courage humility, creativity. And I thought, where have I seen that before? And where I had seen it before was in the ancient Stoic virtues, so the work of Aristotle, Marcus Aurelius, and so on. What were called the virtues, but were really habits. They're kind of habits of excellence. People confuse the word virtue nowadays. They think of it as something solely moral or even moralistic, as in virtue signaling, something bad, showing off, But what the ancients meant by that is habits that leads to human excellence. And then there's a third piece of this convergence, which is contemporary positive psychology, where they are studying what they call character strengths, but they are also courage and self-discipline and creativity and humility and so on. And this contemporary research over the last 30 years or so show it's amazing. As I start to read through their research, study after study after study says the same thing. As you grow in any one of these habits, you become happier, you become more effective, you become healthier, and life just gets easier. So I'm thinking, wow, this is a gold mine here. This is the consultants, the researchers, the ancient philosophers, all more or less saying the same thing, but nobody has put it all together. So that's what I tried to do with super habits. And the name super habits, because what we're talking about is not just any habit. It's not like making your bed or wearing a seatbelt. There's something very special and something very particular about this particular set of habits that makes them like superpowers, hence the word super habits.
Nice. Okay. That's really a great background on how you came about, putting this together, which is amazing. And, when I think of habits, I think of creating consistency on different activities that I want to either become better at or, that's just, that comes natural to me. So for example, I think I shared with you on our pre-call here, I'm a pilot. And one of the things that my first instructor reminded me that it's all about muscle memory, right? And that when you're in a situation that is in like an emergency or you're training, right? What I'm trying to get at is you're training in those habits that you've built, they naturally come automatically, right? It's that muscle memory that's if, like, say I lose an engine, right? What do I need to do? I know that I have a procedure that I follow, right? And I practice that for so long. I've been flying for 12 years. And for every new plane or every different plane that I fly, I do this. I read the POH, for example. It's the book that defines how to fly the particular plane, right? And there's emergent situations, and those are the things that you practice. Something happens, you put the flaps up or whatever, all those different things that I have to do, right? You memorize it, right? And then when it actually happens, it's natural to you compared to because I think you might, I don't know if you highlight this in the books, but if you in a situation where it's an emergency or is something like your flight or flight individual, you're either going to fight it or you're going to run away from it, and your mind just shuts down. It's like a deer in the headlights, and it was like, oh no, what am I going to do? So
you're exactly right. It's a perfect analogy, because the super habits, the virtues, are a form of muscle memory. They are sort of psychological muscles. And we mean this, that's just not analogy in the sense, we know that our brains have this characteristic called neuroplasticity. And that when you do repetitive actions, you create new pathways in your brain that then become part of you. So through practice, so this is the beautiful thing. You're talking about kind of a situation that might provoke fear. The super habit of courage. So courage is a super habit. And what it is the habit of moving forward, doing what you need to do, even though you might be afraid. And it's totally trainable. You start out by little things that you're afraid of, and you kind of, the psychology, they call this exposure therapy. So if you're afraid of spiders, for example, you get into panic when you see a spider. They start out with a little spider, put it in front of you, and you just sit there, and you're like, okay, it's not hurting me, and then you get progressively bigger and scarier spiders, and the fear of spiders is still there, but your ability to act is improved. And so that's, in a way, how you train yourself to become courageous. And I just think that's really, really good news, because people go around talking about themselves and each other's, so-and-so is very, very brave. So-and-so is kind of disorganized. This one's not very creative. These are labels we put, all of which are fluid in the sense that they're all amenable to this neuroplasticity. Any one of us can learn to be courageous, to be creative, to be orderly. Some of us have a step forward because of our different personalities. We'll be already kind of more advanced in some of these habits. But anybody, any human being can grow in any of these super habits. And as you do through little simple practice steps, and as you do that, you get happier and healthier and more effective, and life gets easier. So it's just a win-win, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. And as you're talking, one of the things I was thinking is the discipline of consistency, right? Of being able to, if you make a choice to build a habit, it's not so much the drive, but it's about building that consistency, because if you don't have that consistency, it's not going to become a habit, right? Is what you're saying, and right?
And yes, and that's really, really important. And I want to talk about the word discipline, because some people see this as sort of a catch-22. It's like, well, I need discipline that I don't have to get a new habit, but I don't have discipline. So how am I going to do that? Because self-discipline itself is one of the super habits. In fact, it's a kind of as a virtue, we call it a cardinal virtue. It's a big one that actually there are 15 different super habits of self-discipline. So you can pick kind of one at a time and grow in them rather than just grow in self-discipline in general. But if you take self-discipline apart, what you find is it is the habit of being able to decide whether or not to follow a desire that you have. Mm-hmm. And so when somebody looks like they're disciplined, it's not like they just have an iron will. It's that they have this ability to say, okay, right now I feel like doing this, and it's a good thing, so I'm going to do this. Another time I feel like doing that, then it's not a good thing, so I'm not going to do it. So I'm driving and somebody cuts me off, and I want to scream at him and honk at him and try and cut him off again. Very dangerous, right? Especially if I try to. So I feel like doing that, but I go, okay, not going to do it. That's what self-discipline looks like. And the beauty of it is as it becomes a habit, it doesn't tax your willpower too much. Because when we see people who are very self-disciplined, we think, oh, they must have so much willpower. No, they probably have the same willpower that you have, but they husband it better. They because they're not wasting it on doing routine things, because those things have become a habit. So, for example, one of the very basic super habits of self-discipline is the super habit of restraint. And that is basically dealing with small petty impulses that you might get, such as I mentioned, but in traffic, or let's say you're on Amazon and you see something you like and you want to click to purchase. The super habit of restraint has you going, wait, maybe I'll just put it in a wish list and I'll see if I still want it tomorrow. It's a reasonably simple thing to learn. One of the exercises you can use, and this is all based on. So in the book, I give for each of the super habits some example exercises that you can do to grow. One of these is what they call a speech modification exercise. A lot of us say things like or yup or nope instead of yes and no. And so this would be for a period of time during the day, maybe for the first hour, or then you can grow to all the morning or whatever. Instead of saying yup and nope, I'm going to say yes or no. Very simple, but it starts to strengthen that restraint muscle. And the beauty about super habits, and this is one of the things that makes them very different from regular habits, is as you grow in a super habit in one area, it can be used in every other area. So the restraint that you grow in by just changing the way you speak will then also help you with not buying useless stuff, not yelling at people. It's powerful. So what I say to our students, we have a lot of students on our football team. I say the courage that you build on the football field, you can use in a job interview, you can use when giving a presentation. It's very portable that way.
Yeah. Beautiful. Would you say mindset has to do a lot of it? Like, there's a difference between growth mindset and scarcity mindset, right? Like the growth mindset, you're all about, challenges are opportunities, and, or scarcity mindset is like the world is against me. And, you see it from different perspective, right? So how does the mindset impact the habits?
In some ways, I want to say you need a little bit of one and a lot of the other. So the scarcity mindset is useful if you think about it in terms of willpower. Think of your willpower as a scarce resource and just focus it where you need it. Everything else you want to make a habit. But mostly it's the growth mindset. Each of these super habits, as I mentioned before, anybody can grow in. A fixed or scarce mindset makes it think like at a certain age, our brains are what they are, our talents are what they are, and just that's the way life is. But a growth mindset recognizes that that's not actually true. That at any age in life, you can be creating new pathways in your brain through new practices. And I mean, one of the funny things about the difference between a scarcity mindset and a growth mindset is, depending on which one you believe, it will be true for you. That if you believe your resources are all scarce and your abilities are fixed, that will be the case. That will actually be true for you because you won't even try.
Right.
But if you believe that you can always grow, that will be true for you because you'll try and grow and you'll find that you will. So in fact, the biological truth is the growth mindset is correct, right? That there's always room to grow. And the trick, the really important trick, is to find a practice that is easy enough, obvious enough. So if you read, if you heard of Atomic Habits by James Clear, he has a really popular book on habits, and he makes a point that if you want to grow a habit, make sure it's easy, make it obvious, so that you'll do the thing every day.
Right.
So it has to be easy enough, obvious enough that you'll do it every day. If you pick something too challenging, then you won't do it, and it's all over. But it also has to be enough of a challenge that it's a new thing for you. So you're doing this new thing that is simple each day. It becomes a habit. It becomes easy. You don't have to think about it anymore, and then you can ratchet up the next one, and that's how you grow into a super habit. So
beautiful. And then, as it relates to bringing it back to the leadership side, the kind leadership side, because a lot of our guests are looking for that. How do I become a good leader? How do I move away from that fear of I can't be my authentic self, I can't be genuine, right? Like, are there any recommendations from your book that would allow young, folks coming into the workforce, or even middle tier managers, or even other entrepreneurs, where I want to speak, I want to help others, and I want to lead either an organization, a team, but how do I go about doing it, and how do I build a habit on that?
Yeah, so the thing about leadership, it's complex, right? And it works differently for different people, and it has many different facets. So there are a number of super habits that come into play. So people will talk about things like authenticity and vulnerability, but the difficulty with those is it's not clear when is too much, right? It's possible to overshare, and that's not helpful, But it's also possible to be so afraid of being vulnerable that you are unrealistic, you're not approachable, So there are a number of the super habits that I highlight. Things like honesty, for example, is important, But here's one that most people will find very surprising. Forgiveness is a super habit that is absolutely essential in leadership. In the book, I tell the story of a terrible submarine accident that happened some years ago, where a U.S. submarine accidentally hit a school ship, and a bunch of students and teachers drowned because of it. It's a terrible story. But the reason I tell the story, I went through the whole sort of accident report on that, and it looks like what happened is the captain of the submarine was very capable, brilliant, and wanted to be the guy kind of calling all the shots. And so everybody in the sub is like, I do what the captain says, but it seemed like nobody wanted to be the one to say anything differently. So when there were a few issues arising, nobody wanted to talk about it. As a leader, if you don't have an environment of forgiveness, then people aren't going to bring you bad news. They aren't going to bring you creative ideas. In fact, and after I proposed this, I was looking at some research, and I found that there was a study in Spain of several hundred companies. And what they concluded was that leaders who are forgiving, there's more innovation in their companies. So it's an unusual insight, but I think an important one. So that's an important characteristic. I already mentioned honesty. Another one I think is really important for leadership is one where I actually had to make the name up because there isn't a good English word. And that is the ability to use your anger in productive ways. The technical word, it's a theological word, is meekness. But the problem is most of us, meekness makes you sound like sheep. How is that a leader, Sheep are meek, No, but technically what it means is the ability to take your anger and use it in productive directions. The visual metaphor I like is the idea of the steel fist in a velvet glove. It's a firmness and a gentleness combined. And so I combined those two words and I came up with a new word. I call it gentle firmness. So gentle firmness is the super habit of using your anger and diverting your anger into productive ways. And so the two extremes, because most virtues, most super habits are the mean between two extremes. Right. And so in this case, it's the one extreme is you feel your anger and you explode, right? And that's really bad in a leader because nobody wants to bring you bad news, so you never hear what you need to hear, you know? Right. So that's one extreme. The other extreme is you just keep your anger inside you, and it's very unhealthy. We know this from research, that very unhealthy, leads to all kinds of psychological problems. And so gentle firmness is you feel the anger, and it's a signal that, okay, something is wrong here. I'm now going to use that anger as energy to try to fix the thing that is wrong. Now, typically, one of two things is wrong. It's anger is in a sense the feeling that the world isn't the way you think it should be. When there's a mismatch between the way things are, the way you think they should be, and the way they are, we get angry. Right. You can express as I'm not getting what I want, but it's more complex than that, you know. So you have to then use that energy to decide: A, is the problem with the world, or is it with me? Like if I have unrealistic expectations, you know, that's really important. So first, kind of figure out which it is, and then you use the anger to kind of try to fix either your own expectations or what's going on in the world.
That was beautiful. I got chills for all the descriptions, especially the last one. And I think, you know, when I was describing kind leaders, right, like, you know, I almost related to what you were saying, where people think, oh, kind leaders is kind of weak, kind of like, you know, you're too nice, people are going to walk all over you, right? But the reality is that I love that gentle firmness, right? Is that what you call it? Gentle firmness, where you have that iron fist inside the velvet glove. I love that because it allows for and the way I've been able to counter that people thinking is the accountability. Everybody needs to be accountable for the things that you are as a leader, right? That you're working with your team, and there's always accountability that people forget. You as a leader need to be accountable for whether it's numbers, whether it's people, whether it's whatever, right? And if you're not meeting it, it's your job as a leader and even a kind leader to discuss it with your team. Why are those things not being met, right? And then what is the path to success? And I love what you said about forgiveness. And there's a difference between forgiving, you know, we're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. And if we don't lead with that listening mindset or being able to, okay, what really happened? And the coaching mindset also, right? Like, for example, like if you talk about sports in the past, right? Or you know, examples is like the quarterback throws a pass and it gets intercepted, and then the coach is not going to yell at them, or at least a good coach is not going to be yelling at them. It's like, already happened. It happened, learn from it, move on, right? Because if you don't, you're going to get stuck. You're going to get stuck in that, right? So forgiving your teammates, forgiving your folks, you know, to an extent too, right? Because we can't just continue to forgive and not put the accountability component to it, right? Where there is, I feel like there's always a balance that you can't be too much on the other end, and you can't be too, you know, not enough on the other end too, right? Where you always have to constantly have that balance.
Yes, and with the super habits, though, the super habit is kind of the essence of balance. So there's always two mistakes that you can go onto into different directions, you know. And so with forgiveness, you could see how you just kind of giving in to people and just letting them walk over you, as you say, would be one. But that's not true forgiveness. That's just being a wimp, you know. Right. And then the other is just not being forgiving at all, which is again not forgiveness. So the true super habit is always I prefer the word kind of mean, as in kind of in between, rather than balance, because the balance suggests that so for example, somebody approached me the other day I was talking at a company, and so one of the employees approached me and said, as you go up in one super habit, do you go down in another? Like, are they all sort of in balance? And the answer is no, that true human flourishing is being excellent in all of them. And so while you want to avoid while each one of them is the avoiding of the extremes, being excellent in all of them is not an extreme. It's just that's what human flourishing looks like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. The way I see it is like, for example, my work and my family, right? I can't. It's like if I give it more on the other, I need to make sure that, you know, it's kind of we give the right energy and the right love and the right approach and everything that you're doing, and you can't give up the other one. That's, I guess, is what you're trying to say, right?
Yes, and again, even there, I struggle with the word balance because, first of all, I don't think it's possible to spend too much time with your family. You know, what you need to do is figure out what your family needs and give it to them, and figure out what your work needs and give it to that. You know, and if there are only 24 hours in a day, so you have to figure out what you need, as in 8 hours of sleep and food. You know, and do that as well. And if there aren't enough hours in the day, then it's a question of prioritization, not balancing. If that makes sense? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. No, that was great. So I can't wait. I mean, I haven't had a chance to read fully the book, but I'm excited to learn a lot about the super habits and how can I continue to become better. And we're definitely gonna post it, a link into our podcast so our guests can see that and download it and buy it. And but I'm excited. I mean, a lot of great. I think there's a lot of connections to as it relates to what I'm doing here with the Kind Leader podcast, and really helping with the mindset, helping with building habits. Because I remember like this is my 26th episode, like I said, and last November around this time actually, I got this crazy idea. I was like, maybe I should put a podcast in place. I was like, but people are like, well, you have to be committed, and you have to put all this in place, and then people start one or two, and then they give up, right? It's just the consistency, and for me it almost became like this was my mission in a way, right? Like the belief, like I need to put the word out there. So that was the driver, right? The willpower, like you said. Okay, let's get this started. And I was lucky to find a great, people that helped me put this together and prepare for it. And then once we started putting this together, I didn't worry about. I said, okay, let me just do one or two, episodes a month, and so maybe a weekly if we can. But I don't worry if I don't get it out every week or every 2 weeks. I don't beat myself up, right? I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep trying and I'm going to keep working it. And then slowly this will become a more consistency, it's an evolution is how I feel with those habits, right? You start small, like you said, you just keep building up. And it's also about having fun too, I think, in anything that you want to do. So
It is. Absolutely. Well, you have the determination to learn to fly, I think, and I can see I predict that this podcast is going to be a great success. So,
thank you. I appreciate that. So, as we're coming to a close here, and there's a few more questions I wanted to ask. Is coming back to the leadership side. What do you see the future of leadership? Specifically, like from a kind leadership perspective, what do you see? With students and they're going into the workforce. Do you see a change in the new way of leadership now?
I'm not sure I would call it new, but I think I'm hoping that it's becoming more popular. Is this more kind of other oriented, leadership that we were talking about? I do think that as the idea of the super habits becomes more mainstream, and I'm already starting to see it, the idea of sort of virtuous leadership or kind of virtue in the marketplace, understood always as habits of excellence, which includes moral excellence, but not just that. It's not an exclusively moral topic. I think that we will see stronger leadership coming out of it, and stronger followership as well. That it helps everybody. I want to mention as a tool for your listeners for doing this. There's a QR code in the book, but you can also go directly to it. We have the Super Habits app. It's free. Superhabits.app. It's very easy to find. And what it does is it does a quick diagnostic, a survey, so you can rate yourself on how you're doing on each of the super habits, and then it has an AI coach. You pick one or two that you want to grow in, and it'll text you each day to remind you to do it'll help you choose the practice, the thing you want to practice every day, and then it will remind you each day, and it'll track your streaks for you and so on. And we're also working on a group functionality where you could have everybody on a team, for example, a work team or a division on it. And you'll only see what people are willing to disclose, but then you can also see the aggregate for the whole group and see kind of where are opportunities for the group to grow, and we can help each other. I really think there's a huge performance improvement potential for this as well.
That's amazing. Yeah, definitely plug this into the show notes here, and I'll definitely download it myself and start using it. I'll send you some feedback too. For sure. So thank you for sharing. Okay. One fun question that I like to ask my guests here is, if you could have coffee with anyone alive or from the past, who would it be and why?
From the past, no question, assuming we could speak the same language, would be Thomas Aquinas. He's a medieval philosopher and theologian, 13th century. And a lot of my book is grounded in the system that he sort of put together, which I just think is fascinating stuff. Some people have heard of him, some haven't, but he is the best authority in terms of how all these super habits work together. And the stuff he wrote about then is all being confirmed by the contemporary psychological science. So that's absolutely, I would love to have coffee with him. So
very good, very good. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. So where can our listeners connect with you? I'm guessing LinkedIn or your website?
LinkedIn is where I spend my time. I find it to be the most constructive of the different social media outlets. So if they just search for Andrew Abela or Dean Abela, and I can give you the link for the show notes as well. And they can connect with me there, ask questions, we can chat and so on. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So yeah, if you can send me that, I will upload them here as well. So any final thoughts for our guests?
Yes, one last thing. The book, so Super Habits, the book, which we were talking about, also comes with a fold-out poster of the whole system of super habits, and it shows how they all fit together. And you have to see it to kind of understand kind of the richness of this. And people are framing it, sticking it up on the wall. It's a really good reminder, because what the framework does is it's entirely complete. When I say the subtitle of the book, The Universal System, it has everything in there that you need to be a flourishing human being. So if I wanted to joke, I would say Super Habits is the last self-help book you'll ever read. That's not true. But what it does is it brings all of them together, and it just shows all the parts of what it takes to be a flourishing human being.
Amazing. Yeah, definitely. Again, download that one and start looking at it. And I'm excited for it because there's several habits that I want to start building on multiple areas in my life too. So, but thank you, Andrew, for your time. Thank you for joining us. It's been an amazing conversation. I'm super excited to dive into the book, and thank you for taking the time and building this out, doing your research. It sounds like an amazing, like you said, self-book for people to truly become and become the better version of themselves through the super habits is how I see it. So thanks again, and thank our audience for listening. And feel free to shoot me an email or just feedback on how we're doing, on any other guests that you would like to see in the audience here. So with that, I'll leave you with be kind, bring value, rise together. Have an amazing day, everybody.